The mother who vanished on a shopping trip. 14 years later, her eldest son uncovers the terrifying truth. You'd never guess anything was missing from the Whitley house just by looking at it. The sun filtered in like any other late afternoon, draping golden light across a worn hardwood floor and catching the dust that danced silently in the air. From outside, it looked peaceful. A single-story ranch-style home, surrounded by oaks too old to care about the drama of those living beneath them. But inside, everything felt stretched thin, like the house itself was holding its breath. Natalie Whitley, 19 and far too grown for her age, moved through the hall with a folded blanket in her arms. "Dad, do you want this?" she called from the kitchen, already halfway through pulling it from the linen closet. She didn't wait for a response. She never had to. Gordon Whitley, once strong, now hollowed out by time and a bad fall 14 years ago, adjusted his posture in the wheelchair with a grimace. Pain lived in his hips now. It was an old roommate who never paid rent but never moved out. He nodded gently, more to himself than anyone, and watched his daughter with the kind of soft pride that only came from knowing you didn't deserve someone so good and getting her anyway. The house had gone quiet again, but not for long. The front door creaked open and closed in familiar rhythm. Oliver came in first, the second-born, 25 now, tall like his father used to be. He dropped his car keys into the bowl by the door, the way he always did. Next came June, 23. Her black hair pulled into a tight ponytail, practical and measured, like everything she did. Last, with the kind of noisy arrival only a 15-year-old boy can manage, was Tyler. He dropped onto the couch with a remote in hand and a bag of chips under his arm. The house, for all its history, for all its shadows, suddenly felt lived in again. Lasagna warmed in the oven. Garlic bread sat on a cooling rack, crisping just right. Natalie moved like she had done this 100 times, because she had. She set the table, 5 plates, perfectly spaced, forks and knives aligned, napkins folded with quiet precision. But one chair, the head of the table, remained conspicuously empty. Danny wasn't here yet. "He said he'd be here at 6, Oliver said, glancing at his phone. "It's 6:15, June replied, already halfway through pouring water into the glasses. Natalie glanced at her father, hoping for some comfort or confirmation, but Gordon just stared at the table, a weight behind his eyes. 14 years, 14 birthdays, 14 Thanksgivings, 14 chairs, always one short. And then the front door creaked open again. Danny Whitley stepped inside like a man walking through fog. 30 now, older than his years. His dark coat still clung with the cold outside. His face flushed, not just from the weather, but from something deeper, something burning beneath the surface. "I found something," he said, his voice barely loud enough to fill the hallway. Natalie turned from the table. Gordon tried to straighten himself in the chair. Even Tyler muted the television. Danny held up his phone with shaking hands. "Detective Monroe called me this afternoon. They found a car. Mom's car." No one moved. "In a lake. In Miller's Lake." The room cracked like ice under weight. For 14 years, the Whitleys had lived with a hole no one could fill. Catherine Whitley had walked out to buy groceries and never came back. No phone call, no note, no sightings. Just silence. It became its own member of the family. This absence, this ghost. Oliver stood slowly, arms crossed. What do you mean, found? It was submerged, hidden, but the plates match. The make, the model. It's hers. June set down her glass a little too hard. And? That doesn't mean anything. People dump cars. Maybe she didn't abandon us, Danny interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. You don't know that. You don't know that she didn't, June snapped back. Natalie flinched. Tyler looked down. Gordon closed his eyes and breathed in through his nose, as if trying to draw calm from the air itself. Danny took a step forward, shoulders squared. There were things in the car, some personal items. The detective didn't tell me everything, just that they needed us to come in. Oliver exchanged a look with June, then glanced toward their father. Gordon opened his eyes, heavy with something deeper than fatigue. Guilt, maybe, or longing, or the kind of quiet sorrow that erodes stone. We'll go, he said finally. No one argued, not even June. The table sat, still set for 6. The lasagna now cooled, the bread hardening by the minute. Natalie looked down at the food she'd poured herself into, her effort somehow meaningless now. She turned off the oven. Danny walked past the table without looking at it. He paused in the hallway, his eyes meeting the mirror that had hung there since before they were born. His own reflection looked back at him, tired, unshaven, uncertain. He hadn't cried when she vanished. Not at the memorial. Not at the dozens of times they walked into the grocery store alone. Not even when they cleaned out her closet. But now, staring into that mirror, with her car pulled from the deep and answers rising from the dark, his throat tightened in a way it hadn't in years. It was happening. The silence was breaking, and none of them were ready for what it might reveal. The road to Miller's Lake stretched longer than memory. None of them spoke. Natalie sat in the middle row beside her father, one hand on his arm, as if afraid he might vanish too. Tyler stared out the window, his breath fogging the glass, while June and Oliver rode in the back, silent, guarded. Danny drove. His grip on the wheel was tight, knuckles white. The tires hummed over the blacktop, like a warning too soft to understand. Gordon hadn't been back to that part of the county since the stroke, since Catherine disappeared. It felt cruel that both had happened in the same week, like fate had found a way to cut him down while taking her away. As the van crested the last hill, the water came into view. Miller's Lake, calm and undisturbed, as if it hadn't been hiding a secret for over a decade. Flashing lights danced along the tree line, casting red and blue glows over the surface. Uniformed officers moved like shadows along the shoreline. In the distance, a tow truck stood idle, a black cable coiled like a serpent beside it. Danny pulled up and put the van in park. He didn't move. Gordon spoke first, his voice rough but sure. Help me out. I want to see. Oliver and Natalie lifted their father carefully from the van, folding the wheelchair out and easing him down. Natalie tucked a scarf around his neck, more for comfort than warmth. They made their way toward the edge of the lake where Detective Monroe stood with a clipboard, eyes tired, expression unreadable. You must be the Whitleys, he said quietly. He nodded at Danny. We spoke. Danny returned the nod. This is my father Gordon, my siblings. The car is hers, Monroe said. No preamble, no soft landing. Blue Honda Accord, 2004, License plate registered to Catherine Whitley. Gordon exhaled sharply. We recovered it this morning during a drone-assisted survey. Just under 9 feet of water. No sign of external damage to indicate a crash. Windows were rolled down. Car was intentionally sunk. Was she in it? Oliver asked. His voice broke a little. Monroe shook his head. No. The vehicle was empty. No biological remains. But we did find several items in the glove compartment, sealed in a plastic bag. He reached into a folder and pulled out an evidence photo. A water-damaged receipt, a man's sunglasses, and a baseball cap. June frowned. That doesn't prove anything. Maybe someone stole her car. Maybe... There was also this, Monroe added, handing over another photo. It was an image of Catherine. A snapshot taken long ago. Younger, smiling, eyes crinkled at the corners. Folded carefully into the bag. Preserved. Natalie let out a soft gasp and clutched Gordon's shoulder tighter. Monroe hesitated. We ran the name on the receipt. Ronald M. Last name redacted pending further investigation. He's known to law enforcement. Not a good man. Danny's jaw tightened. She didn't just leave. June folded her arms. Danny, come on. We all loved her. But maybe she couldn't do it anymore. Dad was in the hospital, 5 kids, no money. So she fakes her own disappearance? Danny snapped. She leaves us without a word for 14 years? She left a car at the bottom of a lake with a man's stuff in it. What does that look like to you? June countered, voice rising. Oliver stepped in. Enough. This isn't the time. But the words were out. The fracture, long buried beneath routine and ritual, split open again. All the years of resentment, grief, guilt, they rose like floodwater. Tyler sat down on a nearby rock, staring at the lake as if it could give him answers. Natalie knelt beside Gordon, wiping his brow with a handkerchief she'd kept since she was 12. He was pale. We should go, she said softly. Monroe gave them a minute, then cleared his throat. There's more, not here, but in the evidence file. I'll send it with you. It includes scanned documents, one of which, well, you should see it for yourself. Danny took the envelope in both hands. He didn't open it. Gordon looked at Monroe. What are the odds we find her now? The detective didn't lie. Low, but not zero. That night, as they drove home, the van was filled with silence thick enough to crush. The air had changed. The past, once sealed like a tomb, had cracked open, and something old, something dangerous, was beginning to stir. Natalie leaned against the window, eyes closed. In the rearview mirror, Danny saw his reflection, lit faintly by the dashboard lights. He didn't look like a man driving home. He looked like someone heading deeper into the dark. Long after everyone else had gone to bed, Danny sat alone at the dining room table, the overhead light humming softly above him. The envelope from Detective Monroe lay unopened in front of him. A silent dare. He had told himself he would wait until morning, that it would be easier with fresh eyes. But nothing about this felt easy, and the idea of sleeping with unanswered questions felt like betrayal. He peeled the flap open with careful fingers, as if afraid the contents might vanish if he moved too quickly. Inside were several photocopies, itemized police notes, inventory lists from the car, photographs of the interior. He spread them across the table, one by one, searching for something, anything, that would change the narrative his siblings seemed ready to accept. And then he saw it. Tucked at the back was a faded document marked miscellaneous, a lease agreement. At first glance, nothing special. But then he saw the name, Elizabeth Carter, the tenant. The signature beneath it was blurred, distorted by water damage. But the loops of the capital C, the graceful slope of the W, they were unmistakable. He knew those letters. They had signed his school permission slips, his birthday cards. It was his mother's handwriting. He stared at the address listed. Not a house, not even an apartment. A warehouse unit on the edge of the industrial district. Why would she rent that? And why under a different name? Danny stood, the chair scraping softly against the floor, and grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door. He didn't tell anyone he was leaving. He wasn't sure what he would say. His gut burned with adrenaline and something else too, something closer to grief than anger, but not quite either. The drive through the night was quiet and cold. Street lights thinned out the farther he got from town. Rows of abandoned factories and chain-link fences lined the road, windows boarded or shattered. The kind of place where people disappeared. The warehouse was smaller than he expected. A rusted sign above the door read, "Quality Furniture Refurbishing," but the paint had long since faded. One light glowed from within, casting a pale smear across the gravel lot. Danny parked at a distance and watched for a moment. Then, just as he reached for the door handle, it opened. A man emerged, holding a styrofoam cup. He was older than Danny had expected, maybe in his 60s, moving with the ease of someone who knew this place well. A security guard, probably. The man walked directly toward Danny's car. There was no pretense of coincidence. "Evening," he said, voice low, but oddly genial. "You lost?" Danny forced a smile. "Maybe. I was just driving by. Saw the light. I run a small business. Been looking for warehouse space. Thought I'd take a look." The man squinted, sipped from his cup. "This place ain't for sale." "Who owns it?" Danny asked casually. "Harvey Doss," the man replied. Danny's stomach turned. The last name was too close. Doss? Any relation to Raymond Doss? The man's eyes narrowed. "You in the market for furniture, or are you digging into things that aren't your business?" Danny stayed still. "Have you ever heard the name Elizabeth Carter?" The man froze. His whole posture shifted. The friendliness evaporated like fog off a hot engine. He stepped closer, hand resting on the window frame. "You need to go," he said. No emotion, no emphasis, just final. Danny swallowed. "Please, I just need to know who she was, why she came here." The man leaned in. "You want ghosts? You're in the right place. She didn't want to be found." Danny tried to hold his gaze, but something in the man's eyes made his breath catch. This wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. He drove away slowly, not wanting to show fear. But the moment he turned the corner, his hands began to shake. He pulled over a few blocks later, sitting in the dark for several minutes. Back at the house, the lights were off. Everyone asleep. He sat in his parked car for a long time, watching the flicker of the porch light through the trees. He had found something real. Not speculation, not theory. Paper, names, reactions. He wasn't imagining this. And if that man knew who Elizabeth Carter was, then someone else might too. Danny pulled out his phone and opened the photo of the lease again. At the bottom, barely legible, was another name, Ronald M. Not just the first name, an initial. He had heard that name before. The receipt in the car. Monroe had said the man was dangerous. Danny wasn't afraid of danger. He was afraid of silence. And this silence was hiding something that was no longer willing to stay buried. Detective Monroe didn't ask questions when Danny called him the next morning. He just said, "Be ready in 15, and showed up exactly that many minutes later, dressed not in a suit, but in jeans and a leather jacket that somehow made him look more like a construction worker than a detective. He wasn't alone. A plainclothes officer named Ruiz rode in the back seat, saying little, eyes scanning the streets with a quiet vigilance. They switched into Danny's car, a few blocks from the warehouse. Monroe had agreed with his logic. The guard had seen this vehicle. It might give them the element of surprise. "You do not leave the car unless I tell you," Monroe said firmly, as Danny slid behind the wheel. "Understood," Danny nodded, his heart already hammering in his chest. The industrial district looked different in daylight, but no less bleak. The sharp edges were more visible. Broken glass caught the sun like knives. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, hollow and echoing. And then they saw it. The same pickup truck was parked by the building. The front door was shut, no lights on, no sign of movement. "Something's off," Monroe muttered, one hand resting just above his holster. Danny parked in the same gravel lot as the night before. The silence pressed in on them. "Wait here," Monroe ordered, stepping out. He approached the building slowly, scanning the windows, then the truck, before trying the side door. It creaked open. He disappeared inside. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Danny's anxiety climbed until it spilled into sweat behind his knees. Finally, Monroe returned, his jaw tight. "It's empty." "What?" Danny got out despite himself. "Come see." Inside, the air was stale, the space cavernous, echoing with their footsteps. But the clues were there, the clean rectangles on the dusty floor where furniture once sat, impressions in the carpet from recently removed shelving, loose wires dangling from the ceiling. Monroe pointed to a set of makeshift partitions near the back. Living quarters, maybe temporary offices. This wasn't just a furniture space. Danny moved through the room slowly. He tried to picture his mother here. Alone. Hidden. He couldn't. It felt like trying to imagine a song in the middle of a storm. Monroe crouched behind an overturned desk, brushing something from beneath it. "Take a look at this." A photograph. It showed a cargo ship, docked at a port. The name was printed in bold along the side, Eastern Horizon. Danny turned it over. On the back, a handwritten scrawl, a departure date circled in red, and a short list of names. Two jumped out at him instantly. Elizabeth C. and Ronald M. Monroe pulled out his phone, speaking quickly to dispatch. "This just became federal. I want that ship tracked now. Get me the Coast Guard." As he paced, he turned to Danny. "They're moving people, or preparing to, probably under false IDs. Danny blinked. "You think my mom might be on that list?" "Yes. And if she's not, she was at least meant to be." They rushed back to the car. As Monroe relayed the ship's information to his tech team, he barked out new orders. "Ruiz, call patrol. Put units on the Whitley house. If this operation knows we're on to them, Danny's family becomes a liability." Danny's stomach turned. "I didn't think—" No one ever does, Monroe said, not unkindly. But we're thinking now. Call your dad. Call every one of your siblings. Tell them to stay put. Danny did as instructed. Gordon was confused, but obeyed. Natalie was scared. June was skeptical. Oliver said nothing for a long time before muttering, "I trust you." Back in the driver's seat, Danny clutched the wheel so hard his knuckles ached. Monroe's phone rang again. They found it. The Eastern Horizon. It's already left port, nearly 12 hours ahead of its scheduled departure. Danny's heart dropped. They knew. The guard last night, when I asked about her, they knew. Monroe didn't respond immediately. His face was grim. Then we better hope the Coast Guard moves faster than they did, because whatever your mother was caught up in, it's still moving, still breathing. And now they weren't chasing shadows. They were chasing a ship. The Coast Guard had eyes on the ship. Monroe stood in front of a wide monitor in the operations center, flanked by techs typing furiously and radios hissing with dispatch noise. On the screen, a blinking dot crept across a stretch of ocean. Eastern Horizon, 120 nautical miles offshore, heading south-southeast. The trail it left on the screen was slow but deliberate, like a needle dragging thread through deep water. Danny stood just behind Monroe, barely breathing. "Can you patch into their onboard systems?" Monroe asked a young analyst in a headset. "We're trying. There's a private server, but we're bouncing off a firewall." Another tech chimed in. "Sir, we do have access to a surveillance app the security guard mentioned during interrogation. It includes security cam feeds, not full ship coverage, but partial." Monroe turned. "Show us." A grainy series of camera windows popped open. One by one, rooms aboard Eastern Horizon came into view. Some showed mechanical storage, others corridors. But one, just one, froze Danny to the floor. A windowed office space. 3 women seated at metal desks, hands moving across old keyboards. Lighting dim, expression blank. Danny took a step closer. "Zoom in on the back corner." The image expanded. The woman farthest from the lens had a thin face, her hair longer now, streaked with gray. But her shoulders, her posture, even the tilt of her head as she paused to rub her temple. "That's her," Danny whispered. Everyone in the room turned. Monroe leaned forward, eyes narrowed. He didn't need a DNA test. The resemblance was undeniable. Catherine Whitley, alive. Danny exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. His hands trembled. A dozen emotions pressed against his ribs all at once. Relief, guilt, fury, disbelief. But one overpowered them all. Resolve. "We bring her back." Monroe nodded. "We're coordinating with intercept teams now. Coast Guard vessels are en route. ETA under 4 hours. We want to board without alerting anyone on that ship." A radio buzzed behind them. Monroe answered. "We have multiple civilian women on board," a voice reported. "Early scans show possible false documents, work IDs, foreign and domestic. Smuggling suspected. Maybe trafficking. No confirmed weapons." Danny looked at Monroe. "What happens if they try to jump ship or scuttle it?" "Then we move faster." Later that afternoon, the Whitley family was gathered in a secure lounge at the station. Gordon sat silently in his wheelchair, eyes locked on the screen across the room where Catherine's face had been shown just once before being covered. Natalie hovered beside him, hand on his shoulder. June stood in the corner, arms crossed, her disbelief slowly giving way to something closer to hope. Tyler was the only one who dared to ask, in a whisper that carried more than he meant it to, "Why didn't she come back?" No one answered. Oliver stared out the window. What if she couldn't? Danny said nothing. He couldn't stop looking at the screen. He wanted to punch something, scream, cry, pray, all at once. "We have to be ready," Monroe told them. "She's coming home, but it might not be the home she remembers." As darkness settled across the sky, the dots on the screen grew closer. Somewhere beyond that ocean, in the metal belly of a ship disguised by routine and rust, Catherine Whitley sat typing into a computer. She didn't know she had just been found. She didn't know her family was waiting, but she would. The helicopter hovered like a great insect over the water, blades cutting through dawn's hush. On the deck of the eastern horizon, uniformed officers moved in coordinated silence, weapons lowered but ready. The women had been found quickly, compliant, exhausted, disoriented, but safe. Danny stood on the dock at Port Caswell, flanked by Monroe and 3 of his siblings. June couldn't stop biting her nails. Natalie clutched Gordon's hand so tightly he winced. The rest of the port was silent, cleared in advance, waiting. A figure appeared at the ship's edge. Danny stepped forward. She looked smaller than he remembered. Catherine Whitley wore a navy jacket zipped to her throat, her hair pulled back loosely. Her walk was hesitant, knees stiff, like someone relearning gravity. She scanned the dock, her eyes squinting against the light. And then, she saw them. Danny raised a hand. For a second, she didn't move. Then her steps quickened. She broke into a run. Danny met her halfway. He didn't remember the last thing she had said to him. 14 years can erase so much. But her voice now, as she sobbed into his shoulder, was unmistakable. "I tried to get back to you. I never stopped trying." His arms wrapped around her as the others joined, a family reshaped by absence, now trying to become whole again. Hours later, in a sterile interview room at the Federal Processing Center, Catherine spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she went. She had been taken, not run. The abduction had been opportunistic, not planned. Her car had been forced off the road. She had fought, screamed, nearly escaped. Then came the drugs, the forged documents, the locked rooms. She had spent the first year in Asia, the second in South America. After that, the borders blurred. She was moved with other women, always promised release, always threatened when she resisted. She had tried twice to escape. Both times, others were punished in her place. So, she stopped trying. Until one man, Ronald M., his name real this time, slipped her a phone for 20 minutes and told her to write a list of every name she remembered, every detail, every smell, every lie they told her. He hid it. She never saw him again. That list, Monroe realized, was what triggered the tip-off. A junior officer in Cartagena found it during a dockside inspection. No context, just names. But it had led them here. When Monroe left the room, Catherine turned to Danny. "How did you know? How did you keep going when everyone else stopped?" Danny stared at his hands. "Because I couldn't live in a world where you vanished without a trace. And because the chair never felt empty. Not really. Just waiting." That night, at the Whitley house, Catherine sat beside Gordon, her hand in his. Natalie brought her tea. June showed her old photographs. Tyler didn't say much, but he didn't leave the room. Oliver slipped out to the porch. Danny found him there, staring at the trees. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Oliver asked. Danny nodded slowly. "She's already more okay than any of us thought possible." In the living room, laughter bloomed for the first time in years. And for the first time in even longer, Catherine looked around the house she built, the faces she loved, and knew something she hadn't dared to believe in a long time. She was home.